The scorching sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty streets of Rajkot. As 22-year-old Sarah walked hurriedly through the narrow lanes, her dupatta pulled low over her face. The year was 1943, and the tension between British colonial authorities and Indian independence movements had reached a boiling point. Sarah's father, Colonel William Henderson, commanded the local British garrison, while her heart belonged to someone the Empire considered an enemy. Arjun waited for her under the old banyan tree at the edge of the village, just as he had every evening for the past 6 months. His dark eyes scanned the horizon nervously, knowing that each meeting put them both in grave danger. As a leader in the local freedom movement, he was already marked by British intelligence. Being caught with the colonel's daughter would mean certain death. Sarah's journey to this forbidden love had begun innocently enough. She had been volunteering at the local mission hospital, teaching English to Indian children, when Arjun arrived one day with his injured younger brother. Unlike other British women of her time, Sarah had always felt drawn to Indian culture and had secretly learned Hindi from their household servants. When she spoke to Arjun in his native tongue, something shifted between them. Their first conversations were cautious, revolving around his brother's treatment and her work at the hospital. But gradually, they began to share deeper thoughts about the future of India, about justice, and about the possibility of a world where love could transcend the boundaries of race and politics. Arjun spoke passionately about independence, while Sarah found herself questioning everything she had been taught about the righteousness of British rule. The transformation in Sarah did not go unnoticed. Her father began to see changes in his daughter's behavior that troubled him deeply. She no longer attended the British social gatherings with enthusiasm. She questioned his policies at dinner, speaking about Indian perspectives with an understanding that seemed too intimate. When he discovered she had been spending time at the village rather than the cantonment, his suspicions grew into certainty. Colonel Henderson was a man of rigid principles and unwavering loyalty to the Crown. The idea that his daughter might be sympathizing with the independence movement was bad enough. But when his intelligence officers reported seeing her with Arjun, his world crumbled. In his mind, Sarah had not just betrayed her country, she had betrayed everything he stood for as a soldier and a father. The confrontation came on a humid evening in July. Sarah returned from the village to find her father waiting in the drawing room, his face stern and his uniform impeccable despite the heat. On the table beside him lay photographs taken by his men, clearly showing Sarah and Arjun walking together, talking intimately under the banyan tree. "Explain this." Colonel Henderson's voice was cold as winter, each word carefully measured. Sarah's heart raced as she realized the extent of the surveillance. She had been naive to think their meetings had gone unnoticed in a town where British intelligence watched everything. "Father, I can explain," Sarah began. But the colonel raised his hand for silence. "You have been consorting with a known terrorist, Sarah. This man is wanted for sedition against the Crown. Do you understand what this means?" His voice rose with each word, years of military discipline barely containing his rage and disappointment. Sarah straightened her spine, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. "Arjun is not a terrorist, Father."
"He's fighting for his country's freedom. And yes, I love him."
The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Colonel Henderson's face turned ashen, then red with fury. "Love? You speak of love with a native rebel? You've disgraced our family name, our country, and everything I've sacrificed my life to defend. Papa, please try to understand," Sarah pleaded, using the childhood name that had always softened his heart. "The world is changing. What we're doing here, the way we're ruling these people, it's wrong. Arjun has shown me." "Enough!" Colonel Henderson slammed his fist on the table, causing the photographs to scatter. "This native has poisoned your mind with his propaganda. You're coming home to England. I've already arranged your passage on the next ship." Sarah's world collapsed in that moment. The thought of leaving India meant leaving Arjun forever. But she also knew her father's determination. Once he made a decision, especially one involving military matters, nothing could change his mind. She spent the rest of the evening locked in her room, frantically trying to think of a way to reach Arjun and warn him that they had both been discovered. Meanwhile, unknown to Sarah, Colonel Henderson was meeting with his senior officers and local British administrators. The consensus was clear. Arjun had to be captured immediately. Not only was he a known independence activist, but his relationship with the colonel's daughter made him a security threat of the highest order. The operation was planned for the next morning. The plan seemed foolproof. British soldiers would surround the village at dawn, while a separate team would secure Arjun's usual hiding places. But they had underestimated the network of sympathy that Sarah's kindness at the hospital had created among the local population. Mrs. Kamala, an elderly woman whose grandson Sarah had helped save from tuberculosis, worked as a cleaner in the British cantonment. She overheard enough of the military planning to understand that the young couple was in mortal danger. That night, Mrs. Kamala made a decision that would change the course of many lives. Despite the risk to herself and her family, she crept through the darkness to the village, carrying a message that would reach Arjun by dawn. "The Sahibs are coming. Take the girl and run, or you will both die tomorrow." As the first light of dawn began to creep across the horizon, neither Sarah nor Arjun knew that their forbidden love had set in motion a chain of events that would test not only their devotion to each other, but their very survival. The British Empire's machinery of control was grinding into motion, and two young hearts stood directly in its path. The message reached Arjun just as he was preparing for what he thought would be another peaceful morning. His contact in the village, a young man named Ravi, burst into his hideout with news that chilled him to the bone. "Bhai, they know about you and the English girl.
They're coming with soldiers.
You have maybe 1 hour before they surround everything." Arjun's mind raced through his options. He could disappear into the countryside, as he had done before when British raids targeted the independence fighters. But that would mean abandoning Sarah to face her father's wrath alone. The thought was unbearable. In the months they had spent together, she had become more than just the woman he loved. She had become his partner in dreaming of a free India where people of all backgrounds could live with dignity. The decision he made in that moment would define the rest of their lives. Instead of fleeing to safety, Arjun chose love over survival. He would try to reach Sarah and convince her to escape with him, even knowing that such an attempt was likely to end in their capture or death. As he gathered his few belongings and prepared for what might be his last day of freedom, Arjun whispered a prayer to Lord Krishna for strength and guidance. The sun was now fully above the horizon, and in the distance the dust clouds raised by marching British soldiers could be seen approaching the village. The final act of their forbidden love story was about to begin, and neither Sarah nor Arjun could imagine how dramatically their world was about to change. Sarah had spent the entire night pacing her room, her mind churning with desperate plans. When she heard the sound of military boots marching past her window at dawn, her heart sank. She pressed her face against the glass and watched as her father's soldiers headed toward the village in formation. The sight filled her with terror, not for herself, but for Arjun. Acting on pure instinct, Sarah grabbed her mother's jewelry box from the dresser. Her mother had died when Sarah was 12, and these precious items were all she had left of her. She stuffed the jewelry into a cloth bag, knowing she might need money to survive. Then she tore up several of her finest dresses, fashioning them into bundles that could be carried easily. If she was going to run, she couldn't look like a British colonel's daughter. The household was in chaos as servants scurried about, preparing for what Colonel Henderson had told them was an important military operation. Sarah used this confusion to slip out through the kitchen, where the cook, Bola, pretended not to see her. His wife worked at the mission hospital and had often spoken kindly of the young Mem Sahib who treated Indian patients with such care. Sarah's heart pounded as she made her way through the back alleys of Rajkot, avoiding the main roads where patrols might recognize her. She had never been out alone in the Indian Quarter before, and the maze of narrow streets was confusing and frightening. The air was thick with the smoke from cooking fires and the calls of vendors beginning their daily trade. She reached the old banyan tree just as Arjun appeared from the opposite direction, his face grim with urgency. The moment they saw each other, both knew their lives had changed forever. There could be no more secret meetings, no more stolen moments of happiness. This was survival. "Sarah, you shouldn't have come," Arjun said, his voice heavy with emotion. "The soldiers are everywhere. Your father—" "I know," she interrupted, breathless from running. "I saw them leaving the cantonment. Arjun, we have to leave. Together, now." Arjun took her hands in his, feeling how they trembled with fear and determination. "Do you understand what this means? If we run together, there's no going back. Your father will never forgive you. The British will hunt us like criminals. Are you truly ready for such a life?" Sarah looked into his eyes, seeing the man she had fallen in love with not just for his passion for freedom, but for his gentle heart and unwavering principles. I'd rather die with you than live without you in a world built on injustice. They began moving through the countryside, staying off the main roads and following paths that Arjun knew from his years in the independence movement. Sarah's delicate shoes, designed for parlour rooms and garden parties, were completely unsuited for walking on rough ground. Within hours, her feet were blistered and bleeding, but she didn't complain once. By afternoon, they reached a small village where Arjun had contacts among the freedom fighters. The village elder, an old man named Keshav, who had been imprisoned twice by the British, took one look at the unlikely couple and understood the gravity of their situation. Without hesitation, he offered them shelter in his modest home. "Beta," the old man said to Sarah, using the affectionate term for daughter, "you have chosen a difficult path, but love that challenges injustice is blessed by the gods themselves." That evening, as Sarah helped Keshav's wife prepare the simple meal of rice and dal, she felt a strange peace despite the danger they faced. For the first time in her life, she was part of an Indian household, sharing the daily rhythms of life that she had only observed from a distance. The women treated her with kindness, teaching her how to roll chapatis and sharing stories of their own struggles under British rule. But their peaceful respite was short-lived. Word reached the village that British search parties were moving through the area, checking every house and questioning every resident. Colonel Henderson had put a substantial reward on information leading to their capture, and not everyone in the region could afford to be loyal to the independence cause when money was so desperately needed. "You cannot stay here," Keshav told them urgently. "By tomorrow, the soldiers will reach this village. There is a place in the hills, an old temple where the freedom fighters sometimes hide. It's dangerous to reach, but it may be your only chance." As they prepared to leave under cover of darkness, Sarah overheard Keshav's wife speaking quietly to her neighbor. "The poor child," the woman said, her voice full of pity. "She doesn't know what awaits a white woman who runs away with an Indian man. If the British don't kill them both, her own people will make her wish she were dead." The words sent a chill through Sarah's heart. But when Arjun appeared beside her, ready for the next stage of their desperate journey, she pushed her fears aside. They slipped away from the village like shadows, carrying only water and a small amount of food that Keshav's family could spare. The path to the hidden temple wound through rocky hills that seemed to go on forever. Sarah's soft hands were soon cut and bleeding from scrambling over sharp rocks. Her fine clothes were torn and dirty, and her carefully styled hair hung in tangles around her face. She looked nothing like the refined British lady who had walked out of her father's house just days before. More than once, Arjun suggested they stop to rest, worried about Sarah's physical condition. But she pushed forward with a determination that amazed him. "I won't be the reason we're captured," she said through gritted teeth, when he offered to carry her across a particularly difficult section of the path. As dawn broke on their third day of flight, they finally reached the abandoned temple. It was a crumbling structure, probably centuries old, hidden in a grove of trees that provided excellent cover. Inside, they found evidence that other refugees had used this place before them: blankets left by previous visitors, and a small store of rice and lentils hidden in clay pots. For a few days, they lived like hermits in the temple, drinking water from a nearby stream and eating sparingly from their small food supply. Sarah learned to cook over an open fire, to wash clothes in the stream, and to find edible plants in the forest. Each day, she became a little less like the privileged daughter of a British colonel, and a little more like a woman who could survive in the real world. But survival was becoming increasingly difficult. Their food was running low, and rumors reached them through a friendly villager that the search was intensifying. Colonel Henderson had requested additional troops from the regional command, describing his daughter's situation as a security emergency that threatened British prestige throughout the region. Worse still, they learned that local informants were being paid handsomely for any information about their whereabouts. The pressure on the rural population was enormous, and many people who might have been sympathetic to their plight were now afraid to help them. It was during their darkest moment, when escape seemed impossible and capture appeared inevitable, that they received an unexpected visitor. A woman appeared at the temple entrance one evening, her face covered but her voice gentle and reassuring. "I am Kamala," she said simply. "I work in the British cantonment, but my heart belongs to Mother India. I have news that may save your lives, but you must trust me completely." Sarah and Arjun exchanged glances, knowing they had few options left. The woman continued. "Tomorrow night there is to be a celebration at the cantonment, the birthday of some British official. Most of the senior officers will be attending, including your father, miss. The security will be focused there, not on the outlying areas. Kamala's plan was bold and dangerous. She would provide them with disguises and false papers that might allow them to reach the coast, where ships regularly departed for places beyond British reach. But the journey would require them to travel through the heart of British-controlled territory, hiding in plain sight among the very people hunting them. There's something else you must know, Kamala said, her voice heavy with reluctance. Your father has issued orders that if you are found, you are to be treated as a traitor to the crown. He has publicly disowned you and declared that you are no longer his daughter. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. She had known her father would be angry, but she had never imagined he would go so far as to completely cut her out of his life. The finality of it was overwhelming, and for a moment she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Arjun saw the pain in her eyes and took her hand. Sarah, we can still find a way to make peace with your father. You don't have to choose between your family and... No, Sarah said firmly, wiping tears from her eyes. I made my choice when I decided that love was more important than loyalty to an unjust system. My father made his choice when he decided that his daughter's life mattered less than his reputation. As they prepared for what might be their final attempt at freedom, none of them could foresee the events that would unfold the following day. Forces were already in motion that would test not just Sarah's courage and Arjun's love, but the very foundations of the world they were trying to escape. The disguises that Kamala brought were simple but effective. Sarah was transformed into a village woman, her fair skin darkened with natural dyes, her blonde hair hidden beneath a faded sari that had seen better days. Arjun dressed as a traveling merchant, his usual simple clothes replaced with the slightly more prosperous attire of a small businessman. The false papers identified them as a married couple traveling to visit relatives in a coastal town. They set out before dawn, joining a group of real merchants and travelers who were heading in the same direction. Sarah kept her head down and spoke as little as possible, knowing that her accent, despite her fluency in Hindi, might still betray her British origins. Arjun stayed close beside her, playing the role of a protective husband while scanning constantly for signs of danger. For most of the day, their journey proceeded without incident. They passed several British checkpoints, but the soldiers were looking for a British woman and an Indian man traveling together, not a humble merchant couple among a group of legitimate travelers. Sarah's heart raced each time they approached a checkpoint, but the disguises held. As evening approached, they reached the outskirts of the town where they hoped to find passage on a ship. The other travelers began to disperse to their various destinations, leaving Sarah and Arjun alone on a dusty road that led toward the harbor. They could smell the salt air and hear the distant sounds of ships and sailors, signs that freedom might finally be within reach. But their luck was about to run out. A local police constable, eager to earn the substantial reward that Colonel Henderson had posted, had been watching the travelers with unusual attention. Something about the merchant couple had struck him as odd. Perhaps the way the woman walked, or the way her husband seemed constantly alert for danger. As Sarah and Arjun approached a small tea stall where they hoped to get information about ships, the constable approached with several local men who had agreed to help him for a share of the reward money. You there, he called out in Hindi. I need to see your papers. Arjun handed over their forged documents, trying to appear calm and cooperative. The constable examined them carefully, then looked closely at Sarah's face. Despite the dye and the sari, something about her features seemed wrong to him. Remove your head covering, he ordered Sarah. I want to see your face clearly. Sarah's blood turned to ice. If she removed the covering, her blonde hair would be visible despite her attempts to hide it, but refusing would also raise suspicions. In that moment of hesitation, the constable's suspicions hardened into certainty. You're the British woman, he shouted, reaching for his whistle to summon help. The Colonel's daughter! And you're the terrorist, Arjun! Chaos erupted instantly. Arjun pushed Sarah behind him and tried to create a path for their escape, but more men appeared from nearby buildings, drawn by the constable's shouts and the promise of reward money. Within minutes, they were surrounded by an angry crowd that grew larger as word spread through the neighborhood. She's a traitor to her own people, someone shouted from the crowd. She ran away with a native. He seduced a British woman, called another voice. He's corrupted her with his anti-government poison. The mood of the crowd was turning ugly. What had begun as an attempt to capture fugitives for reward money was becoming something much more dangerous. Years of resentment against British rule, combined with traditional prejudices about relationships between Indian men and British women, were creating a perfect storm of mob justice. The constable, realizing that the situation was getting out of hand, tried to restore order. "We need to take them to the authorities," he shouted. "There's a proper reward for their capture." But his voice was drowned out by increasingly angry calls for immediate punishment. Someone in the crowd shouted, "There's an old well behind the village. Let's throw the traitors into it." The suggestion was taken up by others, and suddenly the mob was moving toward the abandoned well that had been used in the past for disposing of refuse and, according to local stories, for punishing those who had committed unforgivable social crimes. Sarah and Arjun were dragged roughly through the streets, their hands bound behind them. Sarah's disguise was torn away, revealing her blonde hair and confirming beyond doubt her identity. The crowd grew larger and more hostile with each step, fed by rumors and prejudices that had been building for generations. At the well, an ancient stone structure about 4 feet across and perhaps 30 feet deep, the crowd began to argue about what should be done. Some wanted to throw both fugitives in immediately. Others suggested that only the woman should be punished, since she had betrayed her own race. Still others argued for turning them over to the authorities and claiming the reward. As the debate raged, Sarah and Arjun were forced to their knees at the edge of the well. Looking down into the dark depths, Sarah realized that their desperate flight for freedom might end here, in a lonely place far from anyone who cared about them. She reached for Arjun's hand, and despite their bound wrists, their fingers touched. "I don't regret anything," she whispered to him. "I'd rather die here with you than live a lie in my father's world." Arjun squeezed her fingers. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you. I've loved you from the first day we met, but I've also been afraid that I was destroying your life. If we die here, at least we die knowing that our love was real." The crowd seemed to be reaching a consensus in favor of the most extreme punishment. Several men stepped forward to push the couple into the well, when a new voice cut through the chaos like a sword. "Stop! In the name of justice and humanity, stop this madness." The crowd turned to see a figure approaching through the gathering darkness. It was an elderly Indian man, walking with a carved wooden staff and wearing the simple white robes of a religious teacher. Despite his aged appearance, his voice carried an authority that caused the mob to pause. "I am Pandit Mohan Das," the old man announced. "I have lived in this region for 70 years, and I have seen enough injustice to last several lifetimes. What you are about to do will not bring honor to our cause or peace to our hearts." One of the crowd leaders stepped forward angrily. "Old man, this is not your concern. This woman betrayed her own people to consort with our enemy, and this man has corrupted her with his rebellious ideas." Pandit Mohan Das walked slowly to the edge of the well and looked down into its depths. "Tell me," he said to the crowd, "what exactly is their crime? That they fell in love across the artificial boundaries that politicians have drawn between our peoples? That they chose to follow their hearts instead of the prejudices that keep us all enslaved?" "She's a British woman," someone shouted. "She has no business with our men." The old pandit smiled sadly. "I see. So we are so eager to throw off the chains of British rule that we are willing to become exactly like our oppressors? We will judge people by their race, punish them for the color of their skin, and destroy love in the name of political purity." His words created an uncomfortable silence. Several people in the crowd shifted uneasily, perhaps beginning to question the justice of their actions. Pandit Mohan Das continued, his voice growing stronger. "This young woman could have lived a comfortable life in the safety of her father's house. Instead, she chose to stand with our struggle for freedom. This young man could have stayed safely hidden in our villages. Instead, he chose to risk everything for love. Are these the actions of enemies, or of people who see beyond the divisions that our rulers use to control us?" The crowd was beginning to waver, but the constable and several of the more militant members were not ready to give up the substantial reward money that the fugitives represented. "Pretty words, old man," the constable said harshly, "but these are dangerous criminals. The British are offering enough money to feed several families for a year. We can't let them escape." "And what will you tell your children?" Pandit Mohan Das asked quietly. "That you sold love for silver. That you chose money over mercy." At this moment, something unexpected happened. Sarah, who had been silent during most of the confrontation, found her voice. Speaking in fluent Hindi, but with an accent that clearly marked her as British, she addressed the crowd directly. "My friends," she began, her voice clear and strong despite her terror. I understand your anger. I understand why you see me as the enemy. My people have ruled over you unfairly, taken your resources, and treated you as less than human. I was raised to believe these things were right and necessary. The crowd quieted, surprised to hear a British woman speaking to them with such directness and in their own language. Sarah continued, "But Arjun taught me to see the truth. He showed me that Indians are not subjects to be ruled, but human beings with the same hopes and dreams as anyone else. He showed me that love can exist between any two people who open their hearts to each other. If you kill us tonight, you will be destroying the very thing that proves his beliefs are right." Tears ran down her face as she spoke, but her voice never wavered. "I gave up my family, my country, and my comfortable life because I believe in the justice of your cause. Not because Arjun seduced me or corrupted me, but because he helped me understand that all people deserve to be free." The crowd was now completely silent. Even the most hostile faces showed signs of uncertainty. The constable looked around nervously, realizing that his support was evaporating. Arjun, moved by Sarah's courage, managed to stand despite his bound hands. "Friends, what Sarah says is true, but there's something more you need to understand. The British authorities are not just hunting us because we fell in love. They're hunting us because our love represents everything they fear most. The possibility that Indian independence will create a world where all people are treated as equals." Pandit Mohan Das stepped closer to the crowd. "Listen to what these young people are telling you. They have already sacrificed everything for the principles we claim to fight for. Will we now sacrifice them for money?" The decisive moment came when a woman in the crowd, probably about Sarah's age, stepped forward. "I have a daughter," she said simply. "I would want someone to show mercy if she ever found herself in such a situation." Her words broke the spell that had held the crowd in its grip. One by one, people began to drift away, unwilling to participate in what was beginning to feel more like murder than justice. Soon, only a handful of people remained, including the frustrated constable who realized he had lost his chance at the reward. Pandit Mohan Das approached Sarah and Arjun and carefully cut their bonds with a small knife he carried. "You are free to go," he said simply, "but you must leave this area immediately. Not everyone will be as willing to listen to reason as these people were." As the old man turned to leave, Sarah called after him, "Sir, why did you help us? You don't even know us." Pandit Mohan Das paused and looked back with eyes that held the wisdom of decades. "Child, I helped you because your love gives me hope. In a world filled with hatred and division, every act of true love is a victory against the forces that would keep us all in darkness." He pointed toward the harbor, where the lights of ships could be seen in the distance. "There is a merchant vessel leaving at dawn. The captain is a good man who has helped other refugees. Tell him that Pandit Mohan Das sent you, and he will give you passage to a safe place." As the old man disappeared into the night, Sarah and Arjun stood at the edge of the well that had nearly claimed their lives. They were free, but they were also forever changed by the experience. They had learned that love could triumph over hatred, but only when people of goodwill chose to stand up for what was right. Hand in hand, they walked toward the harbor and toward a new life that would be built on the foundation of a love that had survived the ultimate test. Behind them, the abandoned well stood silent in the moonlight, a reminder of how close they had come to losing everything, and how the courage of one old man had pulled them back from the brink of destruction. Their story would be told for generations in the villages of that region, not as a tale of forbidden love, but as proof that the human heart could overcome even the deepest divisions when guided by truth and compassion. And in the years that followed, when India finally achieved the independence that Arjun had fought for, their love story would be remembered as one of the first victories in the long struggle to build a world where all people could live with dignity and respect.